Hi there, it's Ray with Tarot Living. I hope you're doing well. So tonight we are actually going to talk about knights, believe it or not. I haven't actually done much on court cards, but I had prepared some information for a presentation at the Tarot Society that I did last night. And so I thought, well, I may as well go ahead and just do a video on knights as well. And you'll see Chili Bird playing in the background. We tried it with her on my shoulder, and that just didn't work out today. She was a little bit too hyper, so hopefully she'll be quiet back there. So we're going to talk about knights. It's actually pretty exciting doing a whole kind of preparing something about court cards, because it really helps you to clarify, even in your own mind, like all of the things that court cards can mean and why they can be as complicated and difficult to interpret. I mean, we know that not just knights, but all court cards can be very, rich in meaning in the actual readings. But sometimes when they come up, you're like, oh, what does that mean? Because they can mean different things. And so I think a lot of us know that court cards are not the easiest card to read, because you're not quite sure, does it mean a person? Can it mean an event? That kind of thing. So we're going to talk about knights in particular today, and maybe down the road I'll do pages, queens, and kings as well, which would be my hope. So really, why can they be confusing? Well, first of all, a court card, when it comes up in a reading, can represent an external person in someone's life. So you have a querent in front of you, or a client. Let's call them a client. So you have a client in front of you, and they pull a court card. And it can mean that court card could be representing an external person in their life. So their mother, their daughter, whoever. So that's one thing that it can mean. It can also mean, and I do find this to be true quite often, it can represent a psychological characteristic or an underlying motivation, something that client themselves needs to tap into in order to utilize to get through whatever situation they're asking about. Or they need to tap into that energy to find a solution to whatever it is that the situation is that they've asked about. I find that happens quite a bit, actually. And then the third thing is that they can represent an event. Queens and kings less so than pages and knights, but they can. So we're going to talk about knights today, and certainly knights can represent events, no question about it. They are one of the most active cards in the deck. And we're going to go into that in a little bit as to why they're considered that. But let's talk about first what we do know about court cards in general. So what we do know for sure is that, court cards, they have like a specific meaning for each type of card. So if you've got a page, then that has a specific meaning that can mean beginnings and nascent energy that's not yet developed. And they can mean messages, and they can mean a few things. Knights can mean some kind of action is happening, some kind of change or movement is occurring. And of course, pages can refer to a younger person, knights can refer to a younger male or even a female, but someone who's beyond child years, so kind of a young adult who's maybe not yet terribly mature, but who is an adult. So each court card can mean a specific thing in and of themselves. We know that for sure. The other thing that we know is that court cards stay true to their element or their suit. So if you are pulling a Knight of Swords, he's going to be about sword activity. If you pull a Knight of Cups, he's going to relate to cup watery activities in some way, or characteristics in some way. So those are good things to just clarify. We do know those things for sure. I also think that how we would interpret the court card in a reading can have to do or can be related to the actual question that you ask. So I've got a couple of suggestive questions just as an example. So the first question is, if you asked, what information do I need to know about my current partner? And you pull a court card, and you pull, let's say, the Knight of Cups, or the King of Cups, or whatever it is. You know that question, the court card coming up relates to your question. So it's very likely going to be representing that person that you're asking about. If, on the other hand, you were to ask a question such as, what should I be aware of as I step into online dating? Because this person wants to start dating again. It's just an example. So what do I need to know? And you pull the Knight of Swords. Okay, so that could mean, well, something's going to happen very quickly. There could be messages occurring quickly. Something could develop without much forethought and just sort of really move ahead, you know, with a lot of speed, that kind of thing. So in that case, it's describing the way the event can happen, because we're asking about how an event or how some kind of situation might, you know, what you need to know about it. So in that case, I would say that the Knight of Swords is really representing characteristics of how that event or that situation might develop. So it's really speaking about more of the speed of the event as opposed to a person. That would be my feeling on it. It could represent that, you know, that person is maybe a warning not to, you know, to go too quickly and to take things a little more slow. So it could be more related to them as an internal person, but they need to get in touch with. But in that particular question, it can relate to how that event might actually play out. So I think the type of question that you ask is sometimes indicative of how the court card should be read in a reading. It's just simply my point with that. Okay, so okay, so who are the Tarot Knights? If we take a look at who they are, let's first talk about the fact that every court card has an associated element with them. So, and it varies a little bit between the Kings and the Knights, so I'm going to explain this. So the pages, for example, always fall under, naturally and intrinsically, they fall under earth element. So pages and earth belong together. Queens and water always belong together. Pretty much every book you read. Then you get to Knights and Kings, and sometimes people can flip them around, but I'm going to tell you, I've done a lot of reading on it. I'm going to tell you what I think is probably a pretty accurate way to go. Knights, I believe, represent fire. Intrinsically and naturally, that is the element that describes them the best. Kings are air. That would be, I think, the closest description for me. A lot of people will flip and say that that air is Knights and fire is Kings, and that's okay. If you read up on air and fire and you read up on Kings and Knights and you determine that you would prefer to put the fire with the Kings and the air with the Knights, that's okay. But I just wanted to let you know that intrinsically every type of court card is given an element to help describe the characteristics in general of the Knights or the pages. Okay, so Knights, I put them under fire. And so, you know, if we look at describing a knight in general, we can see how the fire element is sort of seen in it. So if we describe a knight, I would say he's an adventurer, he's a doer, he tends to be a rescuer, a seeker, a traveler. He can be a champion for causes or for a person. He has a quest for knowledge and enjoys gaining experience in life. Those are some of the characteristics of knights in general, and I think they fall under the fire element really well. The other thing that who they are if they're representing an event is, I'm going to give you a description and then I'm going to explain to you what modality they fall under. So if it's an event, knights represent change, movement, sudden events, swift action, potential upheaval, changeability, new experiences, new adventure, comings and goings of matters. Anthony Lewis often uses that reference. And the comings and goings would relate to the suit that you pull. Can be hasty actions or fast-paced situations. So that is a description of some of the events or some of the ways that an activity might occur if a knight comes up in a reading. Now, in terms of modality, there's 3 modalities that we talk about, and this is related to astrological principles. The modalities that exist, and I've gone through them in some of my, I believe in my beginner and intermediate video, are cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Cardinal modality is all about the initiation of things and the beginning of things. Fixed is about being in the middle stage, and it is about the stability and the stableness of the situation. Mutable is the last one, and it's all about the endings of something, moving into a new beginning. So it's about change, versatility, changeability, adaptability, and a lot of movement. So Knights fall under mutability extremely well. So they are mutability, and the element is fire. So in technicality, they fall under Sagittarius if you're going to put those two together. You don't need to put those two together because it's not important, but I just wanted to explain to you that there is a modality, and that I believe Knights fall under the modality of mutability. You will read in some books that they fall under fixed, and I don't think that's as correct. And based on all the reading I've done and just a gut instinct about it, I think you're better off to put them under mutability. If you're thinking about that kind of thing in your mind, if you're wanting to go that extra little step to understand some of the underlying references to Knights. You don't have to know that to move ahead, just so you know. Okay, so let's talk about the Knights. We're going to go through each Knight. So if you pull the Knight of Swords, then let's talk about first that we've just gone through that Knights mean mutability and swords mean air. So mutable air in astrology is Gemini. So if you want to know more about this Knight, you can look up the information on Gemini and it'll help you a little bit more even. But first let's go through some of the characteristics and meanings of the air element, which falls under swords. So the air element is about communication, intellect, thought, perception, truth, ideas, information, logic, reason, and potentially conflict. Those are all the things that we sometimes see under air and swords. Okay? So if you think that if the client has pulled this card and it's in a reading and you feel like it relates to an external person or internal characteristics that the individual has to get in touch with in order to deal with the situation, then some of those characteristics would include the following. Clever, quick thinking, assertive, and very active person. Courageous. He's a take-charge Knight. Brings energy, ideas, and strong opinions to the table. Loves using intellect and versatility to venture into a project or task. This person can be impatient, impulsive, and competitive. Due to strong opinions, can often be in confrontational or clash with others. Articulate person who is often drawn to an intellectual career or communication field. He can be chivalrous and very assertive toward a love interest, however can often represent more short-lived dalliances rather than long-term relationships. Better at starting a project than finishing one because of distractibility and a lack of persistence. If the Knight of Swords has been pulled and you believe that it's related to an event, the event would look something like this. Sudden changes, information or messages coming quickly, short trips, because Gemini rules short trips, activity with regard to communication, quick decisions being made, clash of opinions with others over ideas and beliefs, speedy application of ideas or solutions, commencement or change in intellectually oriented project, job, or school. Okay, and if you've pulled the Knight of Cups, then it is going to relate to the water element. And because the Knight of Cups is mutable and it's water, it's going to relate to Pisces. And so some of the elements of water include emotions, feelings, one's internal life and intuition, desire to connect with others, expression of empathy, nurturing, creative, or artistic energy. So if you have pulled the Knight of Cups and you believe that it is representing an external person in the client's life, or it's representing some type of internal characteristics that they need to get in touch with in order to work out their current situation, then it will look something like this. Their characteristics would be emotionally available, romantic individual, tends to be gallant, chivalrous, flirtatious, and a romantic idealist, socially charming, sweet, and loving person, has a desire to bond and connect with others emotionally and spiritually. Knight of Cups tends to be a dreamer, imaginative, creative individual, has an interest in arts, music, or poetry, a spiritual seeker, mystic, or intuitive person, can be elusive, unrealistic, too much of a dreamer, easily hurt, and emotionally smothering. If you have the Knight of Cups that's been pulled and you believe it relates to an event, the event would look something like this. Changes or experiences with regard to emotional life or relationships, comings and goings related to relationships, a new relationship or courtship on the horizon, adventures or experiences with spiritual or artistic pursuits, someone who is romantically pursuing another, an invitation to social event, or potentially a proposal of marriage. Okay, and if you have pulled the Knight of Wands, because wands are fire and knights are mutable, mutable fire is Sagittarius. And remember how we said that all the knights intrinsically represent fire. So if you've pulled the actual Knight of Wands, which is fire in and of itself, you have fire of fire. All you need to know about that is that this card is very powerful because it is a fire wand, and knights all represent fire, so it's double fire, and there's a lot of fire energy available if you've pulled the Knight of Wands. So mutable fire represents Sagittarius. So some of the characteristics of fire element are vitality, energy, enthusiasm, ambition, optimism, passion, creativity, being ardent or passionate, pioneering spirit, business, entrepreneurial skills, or projects. And that kind of describes some of the basic characteristics of wands. So if you have pulled the Knight of Wands and you believe that it represents an external person in the client's life, or internal characteristics that they need to get in touch with in order to utilize for their current situation, then some of the characteristics will look like this. Fiery, passionate, enthusiastic, charismatic, dynamic individual. A person who is daring, adventurous, and thrives on a challenge. Competitive, athletic, driven to explore and experience life. Very quick-moving person, motivated, eager, and inspirational. Can be impetuous, hasty, impulsive, and hot-headed. Loves to move forward with passionate new ideas. Is career-driven, interest in business or entrepreneurial work. Creative energy available. Loves starting projects. Can be a sexually charged person. Can be unpredictable, overly hasty, and have a quick temper. If you've pulled this card and you believe that it represents an event, the event will look something like this. Sudden changes, swift action with great vitality, but often haste. Departure, journeys or long trips, because Sagittarius rules long trips. Comings and goings of information about business or work, such as a business trip. Quick decisions being made without forethought. New situation or change with regard to higher education, because Sagittarius rules higher education. Important event related to a project or enterprise, or relocation of a new job or home. Okay, and if you have pulled the Knight of Pentacles, then let's talk about that. So knights, as we know, are mutable, and pentacles are earth, and so mutable earth in astrology is Virgo. So if you want to know anything more about Knight of Pentacles, you can look up Virgo and read that. So some of the characteristics of Earth, though, let's talk about that first. So Earth can be very grounded, very solid, stable, reliable. Earth and Pentacles can relate to finances, investments, and property. It can also relate to your health, your physical body, diet, exercise, taking care of yourself, basically. So all of the kind of physical elements in our life, especially Virgo, with regard to caring for oneself. Pets also fall under Virgo. So if you have pulled the Knight of Pentacles, or the client has pulled the Knight of Pentacles, and you think that it's relating to an external person in the client's life, or if it's relating to internal characteristics that they need to get in touch with in order to deal with the situation, then here are some of the characteristics. Methodical, rational person, slow but sure approach with attention to detail, trustworthy, reliable, dependable, and responsible, practical, conservative, quite conventional with common sense, resourceful, industrious, diligent, and hardworking. He likes to build structures, steadiness, and strength. Note that his horse is generally firmly planted on the ground. He can be good with his hands and a practical doer. Can tend to be heavy, dull, or unimaginative. He may sometimes lose opportunities due to delay of action. If you think that this card relates to an event, then the event will look something like this. Slow, methodical actions or changes. Sensible course of action. Activity or events related to areas of finances, health, wealth, and property. Actions are slow, steady, and stable. Use of common sense. Careful planning will improve chances of success. Or business travel. Okay, so I hope that's helped in terms of understanding each of the types of knights and each of their characteristics, and whether they would relate to an actual person, whether it be an external or internal characteristics that need to be utilized, or if it relates to an event. So this has been extremely enjoyable for me, so I hope that you have enjoyed it and that you've gained some knowledge in terms of knights and how to read them in a reading. So thank you so much for joining Tarot Living. Take care.